I started working in the political world actually at a very young age. I was around 12 when I started working on my first campaign. I lived in a really small city which had a growing population, and I was dealing with a lot of issues around the youth violence and like sort of criminalization of young people. And so I joined forces with a local youth empowerment group who was doing some campaign work to build a youth center and actually a skate park. We ended up being ultimately successful in getting the skate park, but weren't able to get the youth center. So it kind of was my first foray into how the political process works, how to be a part of government. Through that work, I ended up actually going to Sacramento to the state capitol quite a bit. So from the time I was in middle school through high school, and in high school I was at one of the many protests in the state capitol to try to actually decriminalize driving while black or brown. And I remember looking up at the state capitol window, and there was people in there looking down at us, and I just thought, why am I down here protesting? I should be in there actually making some of these laws. So I went and I talked to absolutely everyone who would talk to me who had ever worked in politics at the Capitol, both at the state level and in Washington, D.C. And sort of the common thread was that the best thing to do would be to study policy or public policy. So I went on to study that, and sort of long story short, it's kind of how I ended up here. So I was able to graduate a year early. I went and I got accepted into a fellowship called the Polanco Fellowship through the Hispanic Caucus Institute in Sacramento. That fellowship does not exist, but we still have a Senate and Assembly Fellowship. And so that's for recent graduates who are California residents who are interested in working in the state capitol. While I was in Sacramento in the Capitol, I felt a little insular. You were working very much on policy, so I was practicing exactly what I had studied, right? But it felt very, I wasn't working with the community as much. It was very removed, and so I had actually, through my work back in high school, worked with my local state senator in the area where I had grown up and got to know his staff really well, which is something I would highly recommend you do. Get to know people at a very young age that are doing what you want to do in the long term, because guess what? They remember you, and they will call you when you grow up and they have openings or job openings and positions. So what I would recommend to all young people is intern, do as many different jobs as you can. Just as important as knowing what you want to do is knowing what you don't want to do. And it also teaches you sort of how to be a good boss, right? Having bad bosses is how you learn to be a good boss. Having bad jobs is how you learn to recognize what a good job is. And then in addition to that, I think the one thing I tell all of our interns and all of the young people who ever want to talk to me about how do I get into politics, how do I get a job like yours, what do I study, what should I do? I always say, do informational interviews. They are the #1 successful thing I can recommend. And people love talking about themselves, and they love helping young people. So I ended up calling all of these people out of the blue. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. I interviewed them. I asked them, how did you get here? What did you want to do? I gave them a copy of my resume. I asked them if they had any suggestions about what I could do to get into that career field. I also asked them what they loved and what they didn't love about their job, because people are really honest with you on a one-on-one basis, and it'll give you an idea about, are those things that I would really want to be doing in the long term? Are they perhaps maybe that's a different job than I had originally anticipated. And I learned a lot about myself through that process. I learned a lot about what I didn't want to be doing when I grew up. And ultimately that's, taking my resumes with me. I'm going to tell you something. I keep my resume super up to date, and as a result of that, I get calls all the time from people who are looking for, hey, I'm looking for somebody to do this kind of work. Is it interesting to you? Would you want to apply? Be nice to everyone. Network. Some of your colleagues are going to end up being your bosses one day. Maybe you're going to be the boss of somebody you didn't realize. So just be respectful and courteous and nice to everyone, and work on building bridges, not burning them. It's really important. And I know that sounds it's just kind of a no-brainer, but I think it's really easy when you're young and sort of social things and other ththings get mixed into work, because we all work so hard that we spend a lot of time in our work life. It's important to just keep that in perspective and remember that you never know who your next boss is going to be. Don't hold grudges, move forward, learn from your mistakes.